Today we are talking about the mysterious case of Irene Garza. On the 16th of April, 1960, around 6:30 in the evening, Irene Garza got in the family car and went to church. She promised her mother that she would return soon, but Irene never came back. Irene Garza was born in 1934 to Josefina and Nicholas. She became Miss All Texas Sweetheart in 1958. At the time of her disappearance, Irene was a second-grade teacher to indigent students. She was a devout Catholic and lived with her parents on the north side of McAllen. The school she taught was on the south side of the city. Irene was a natural beauty. She was the first person in her family to attend college and graduate school. In her letters to a friend, Irene described herself as extremely shy and seemed content in her work. On the 16th of April, 1960, Irene drove to the Sacred Heart Church, where she planned to go to confession. Because of her striking appearance, several parishioners remembered seeing Irene at the church that night. When Irene didn't return, her parents first thought she might have stayed at the church for the midnight mass, but by 3 a.m., they got worried and went to the McAllen police to report Irene missing. On the 18th of April, a passerby found a single high-heeled shoe on the side of McCall Road. Irene's family confirmed that it was Irene's. Later, a fellow teacher spotted a black leather purse lying in the middle of a field, 300 yards north from the spot where Irene's shoe was discovered. No fingerprints were found on the purse. Irene's driver's license was found inside it. Farther north, investigators found Irene's lace veil, crumpled in the bush. Authorities and volunteers started the largest search in Rio Grande Valley's history at the time. Skin divers searched the irrigation canals. 2 Border Patrol planes also searched the area looking for Irene. 65 National Guardsmen also joined the search. Investigators followed on many leads. A woman claiming to be Irene called Irene's house. She claimed she had been kidnapped and was being held in a hotel in the nearby town of Hidalgo. When the police officers went there to check, it was found that the call was a hoax. Another person boasted to an Edinburgh waitress that he had killed Irene Garza and that she was next. But it turned out to be a joke. The man admitted that he was very drunk when he made this cruel joke. On the 21st of April at 7:40 a.m., McAllen police got a call reporting a floating body in the 2nd Street Canal across from Scars. The area was several miles away from the other evidence. It was confirmed that this was indeed Irene. Post-mortem examination confirmed that Irene Garza died of suffocation. It was also confirmed that she was indecently assaulted while unconscious. Any physical evidence that could lead police to the truth was washed away because of the water in the canal. There were a lot of speculations in the local newspapers. This city was in a state of near hysteria. A newspaper in Monterrey, Mexico, wrote that a prominent McAllen citizen, Leo de Leon, was the man behind the crime. Leo de Leon had died of a heart attack days after Irene's disappearance. But this whole story was debunked by the police. Many suspected a transient or a frustrated suitor, as Irene was considered extremely beautiful. There was also wild rumors. A rumor no newspaper dared to print was that a priest was behind all this facade. He was the proprietor of the crime, but as the faith in the church was strong at the time, people felt guilty even for thinking such an unholy idea. The only clue in the case was a muddy shoe print, which was spotted on the bank of the 2nd Street Canal. But because of the rain, police were not able to make out details of the dimensions. The only information that police were able to extract from the print was that it was a men's size shoe between 8 and 11. Mayor Philip Boyer announced that the city's police were given a blank check for the cost of the investigation. Detectives questioned about 500 people from several Texas cities. 50 polygraph tests were carried out. a reward for $2,500 was offered for any information relating to the case. Reward money, totaling to $10,000, was posted by South Texas businessmen. Investigators took statements from Irene's friends, family, ex-boyfriends, co-workers, and anyone who saw Irene on the night of her disappearance. They grilled any man who had taken Irene out on a date. That evening's confession lines were again created to map out who had stood where, but all this was of little use. As time passed, the investigation seemed to have come to a standstill from the public's view, but investigators secretly began focusing on John Feit, the 26-year-old priest. His name kept turning up in the investigation. Feit denied hearing Irene's confession in the rectory during his initial statements, but he later admitted to it. In his initial statements, he said Irene had come to the rectory to discuss a question of conscience that couldn't be disclosed, and that he had sent Irene to the sanctuary to confess. But later he claimed that he had heard Irene's confession in the rectory because Irene was afraid that someone could hear them in the sanctuary. Hearing confession in the rectory was considered highly inappropriate by the other priests at the time. It was also reported that Feit's confession line moved slowly that night, and he was away from the sanctuary several times. Father O'Brien had noticed scratches on Feit's hand when they gathered to drink coffee after midnight mass on the night of Irene's disappearance. Suspicions on Feit increased when a woman named Maria America Guerra claimed that 3 weeks before Irene's disappearance, while she was kneeling at the communion rail at the Sacred Heart Church in Edinburgh, a man grabbed her from behind and tried to clamp a rag over her mouth. She screamed, and in the struggle, she bit the attacker's hand. The attacker threw her to the wall, and she ran out of the church. Guerra believed the attacker was a priest. The attacker was wearing black pants, and priests often wore black pants. Local church leaders discouraged people from even considering that a priest was behind all this. By April's end, investigators were able to drain the portion of the canal where the muddy shoe print was discovered. A photoslide viewer was found in the drained part of the canal. Police asked for the public's help to find the photoslide viewer's owner. 2 days later, Father John Feit came forward and confirmed that it was his. In early May, police questioned Father John Feit. He claimed Irene left the rectory between 7:15 and 7:20 that night. He explained that he had broken his glasses that night because he was playing with them nervously as he was listening to confessions. He further explained that he drove to the pastoral's house to get another pair of glasses, but he had no key. So he proceeded to climb into the house, which was on the second floor, and that was where he got scratches on his hand that Father O'Brien noticed. The next day, detectives questioned Father Feit about the attack on Maria America Guerra. In his sworn statement, he admitted to visiting a priest at the church on that day, but he insisted that he left an hour before the alleged attack happened, because he had to ring the 5:30 bell at the pastoral house in San Juan. He also explained that his finger got caught in the mimeograph machine on the day before the attack on Maria, which is why his finger had been badly cut. Several priests later confirmed that Father Feit had not returned to San Juan in time to ring the 5:30 bell. They also said his fingers were fine before the night of the attack on Maria. It was also confirmed that Father Feit was wearing the same clothes that Maria described her attacker was wearing. Maria, and an eyewitness who claimed to see the attacker fleeing the church, picked Father John Feit out of the lineup as the man most resembling the attacker. A polygraph team was brought in to administer the test on Feit. During his tests, Feit attempted to control his breathing. The report of the test was prepared by John Reed, possibly the top polygraph examiner in the country at the time. The report implicated Feit in both crimes. It reads, "It is the opinion of the examiner, based on this subject's polygraph test, this subject is purposefully attempting to defeat the recordings. Feit was purposefully taking 10 breaths per minute whenever he was hooked to a polygraph machine, despite the warnings and instructions given by the test administrator." Feit's normal breathing rate was secretly monitored by the examiners. It was 16 to 20 times a minute. The report further read, the examiner pointed out in detail to the subject that he should make an effort to tell the truth concerning his implication in these crimes so that the church and the priesthood would not suffer when evidence definitely implicating him is turned up at a later date. The subject, in very deliberate and explicit words, stated there will never be any evidence turning up in the future of this case. During the questioning about Maria America Guerra's case, Feit claimed Maria's attacker had confessed to him. The report reads, the subject was queried as to where the confession was obtained and told the examiner that it was not in the confessional box, not in the rectory, but out in the open someplace, and was very vague as to where the open place was. Despite this, the test report was useless because polygraph exams weren't admissible in court. In August, the attempted indecent assault case was filed against Feit. After this, Feit became a household name. Feit left the state and was declared a fugitive. Later, he surrendered. It was believed Feit couldn't get a fair trial in Hidalgo County, which is why his trial was moved to Austin. On the trial's end, the jury deadlocked 9-3 in favor of conviction. In 1962, rather than facing a second trial, Feit entered a plea of no contest to a misdemeanor charge of aggravated assault and paid a $500 fine. No murder charges were filed against Father Feit concerning Irene's death. People wondered if a deal had been struck to avoid embarrassment to the church. Father O'Brien told Irene's family that the church's punishment was greater than any sentence handed down by the court. Father O'Brien assured the family that Father Feit would be sent to a monastery. Feit was sent to Assumption Abbey, a Trappist monastery in Missouri. There, Feit met with Dale Chachney. Dale Chachney was charged with the job of counseling Feit and determining whether Feit can become a monk. One day, Chachney asked Feit about the rumors of his past. Chachney asked, why was he there and not in prison? Feit replied that the church was behind him. After some time, it was clear that Feit did not feel comfortable with the monastic lifestyle. Feit asked to be transferred. Seniors told Chachney to prepare Feit so that he was no longer a threat to society. Chachney had some psychology background, having studied the subject. At the time, the Trappist order believed that priests could be healed. Chachney started by getting to the bottom of the truth. Feit confessed to Chachney about hunting a young lady and killing another one. Chachney thought he had to break the impulse which led Feit to commit these violent actions. Chachney questioned Feit about the things that led to Feit to perform such actions. Feit admitted it was the click of women's heels that bugged him. Feit also admitted that sometimes he felt the urge to attack women from behind, particularly when women were kneeling. After this, Chachney began Feit's therapy. Once Feit felt he could control his urges, he was sent on a mission. He was sent to several churches to see if he could control himself while standing behind women. Feit returned and reported he was successful in the mission. After this, Chachney believed Feit could be sent back into the world. Feit was then sent to a treatment retreat for troubled priests in James Springs, New Mexico, which was run by the servants of the Paraclete Order. Feit joined there as a staff member, but rose to the position of supervisor. While there, Feit sent priests who were dangerous to the society back into communities across the country. While working there, Feit fell in love with a light-skinned young Hispanic woman. In 1971, Feit left the priesthood and got married to the girl. In December of 1971, Father O'Brien wrote the following letter to McAllen Police. Dear Chief, I have received notice that John Feit has left Denham Springs, New Mexico, and is now living in the Chicago area. He is seeking employment as a layman and will no longer function as a priest. This was his own decision and was not due to a problem. Any further information is needed, please feel free to call upon me. Father Joseph O'Brien, OMI. John had 3 children and worked at the Society of St. Vincent de Paul as a food volunteer for 17 years. It seemed as if everyone forgot about Irene and moved on. But this was not the case. After Chachny left the priesthood, he started feeling guilty. Finally, in 2002, while living in Oklahoma City, on a warm April afternoon, he called the San Antonio Police Department. He believed the crime about which Feit confessed had taken place in San Antonio, as Feit had spent time there while training. Chachny was not aware of the place or time of the crime. Chachny assumed the year of the crime was 1963, as Feit had come to Assumption Abbey in 1963. Detective George Sadler, who picked up his call, couldn't remember any case that resembled the details which Chachny was telling, so he asked Chachny to put everything he knew in writing. Chachny wrote a 2-page letter describing what he knew in detail. Detective George Sadler searched through records of old cases that took place in San Antonio, but no case seemed to resemble the details mentioned in the letter. Detective set aside the case as he failed to find anything in the records. Later in 2002, Texas Ranger Rocky Mellon visited Sadler's office for some work. During the casual conversation, he mentioned details about Irene's case. He was pointing out how they were working in cases as old as 40 years. George Sadler immediately picked on the details and pressed Mellon for further details. Sadler learned that the detective working on the case was Texas Ranger Rudy Jaramillo. Sadler met with Jaramillo, and the two exchanged their notes. In November, Chachny drove to San Antonio and sat with Detective Jaramillo. He shared everything he knew, and Jaramillo got all of that on tape. Chachny wept after they finished recording. In 2003, police requested Del Chachny to call Feit, and the call was recorded.
Hello.
Hello, John.
Yes.
This is Dale Chachny.
Dale. Long time no hear. Are you still at the monastery in Ava?
No, I left the monastery at Ava in 1965.
All right, how may I help you, Dale?
What I need to somehow clear my conscience of what has happened in the past. I've been, for about 40 years now, covering up and holding within me something that I've known about and could never talk about. And yet I feel I too, like you, have injured some people by my behavior. The things that we discussed while you were at the monastery are not quite the same, it appears to me, as a newspaper article that I had read more recently of a young girl's tragic demise.
Are you referring to the Irene Garza murder in the Rio Grande Valley?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah, that has been in the newspapers recently.
Yeah, and what I've read doesn't coincide with what you told me about that. And there are relatives that are living, and I would really appreciate, or helpful to me at least, if you'd come with me to those relatives and...
Come with you to those relatives?
Yeah, and explain to them that, we've been responsible. You've been responsible on your end for the accident or unfortunate thing that happened. I covered up along with you all these years.
And I am telling you this evening that I am not the man who killed Irene Garza. And I certainly don't intend to instruct you, but I can only say that you're going to have to go with your conscience on this and do what your conscience tells you is right, because that's exactly what I'm doing.
Well, I guess I'm very confused then now. More so than I was before, because you told me that you did in fact participate in the death of a young woman.
Well, I can only repeat myself and say I am not the man who killed Irene Garza. And that is the story that's circulating in the newspapers at this time.
Was it somebody else then that you told me about?
At the time I was in the monastery, I was pretty much a broken man. Psychologically, emotionally, spiritually. I have no recollection, but I may have told you at that time. And it grieves me that it's causing you pain at this point in your life. I will pray for you.
What?
That this cloud and this cross might be lifted from your mind and heart.
Rudy Jaramillo was also able to find another witness, Father Joseph O'Brien. Father O'Brien told detectives that he suspected Feit from the beginning. He was so suspicious of Father Feit that, together with another priest, he searched the attic and the basement of the Sacred Heart a day after Irene went missing. He also followed Feit later that day but lost him. Despite this, the detective felt as if O'Brien was not giving full information. During the last round of questions, they were able to break O'Brien. He admitted when he had confronted Feit and asked him whether he killed Irene. Feit confessed to him everything. Now, this case has two witnesses, Tachny and O'Brien. Both were ready to tell the truth in court. In the spring of 2004, the investigators presented the case to the district attorney's office. Irene Garza served as district attorney in Hidalgo County at the time. When in 2002, Garza was asked about Irene's case, he reportedly replied, "Why would anybody be haunted by her death? She died. Her killer got away." His comment didn't sit well with Irene's living family. First cousins, aunts, and uncles. Irene's parents died in the 1990s. Garza's reasoning for not revisiting the case was that the early police investigation was badly done and that while being questioned, O'Brien was suffering from dementia. Garza also believed detectives had inappropriately fed Tachny the location of the crime. There was no physical evidence in the case, according to DA Garza. When questioned why Garza was not pursuing the charges in the case, he told the local media that without DNA or a confession from Feit, he doesn't have enough evidence to present this very old case in front of a jury. This started a war of words between Garza and McAllen Police Chief Victor Rodriguez, who had decided to reopen the investigation of Irene's case in 2002. Garza started receiving criticism. Garza was also part of a powerful Catholic family. Finally, in March of 2004, after months of negative press, he agreed and prosecutors presented the evidence of the case to a grand jury. Only one witness was called, a secretary from Sacred Heart Church in McAllen, who was also a defense witness for Feit in his other trial in 1961. O'Brien and Tachny were not called. Jurors were presented with transcripts of Tachny and O'Brien's testimonies. John Feit was also not called. The jurors voted not to indict Feit. After this, Tachny went to McAllen to apologize to Irene's family. O'Brien died in 2005, and the case was again dead until 2014. In 2014, Irene's case was once again in the spotlight when District Court Judge Ricardo Rodriguez campaigned against Garza for the district attorney's seat in the Democratic primary. The Irene case arose as a campaign issue. Rodriguez promised if he got elected, he would review the case. He won and was now the new district attorney. In April 2015, Rodriguez announced that the case was again being investigated. In February 2016, 83-year-old Feit was arrested in Scottsdale, Arizona. He was charged with Irene's death.
But this whole thing makes no sense to me because the crime in question took place in 1960.
By now, Feit walked with the help of a walker. He entered a plea of not guilty. The defense team asked for a $100,000 bond, and a $7,500,000 bond was requested by the prosecution team, but Judge Louis Singletary a $1 million bond. After some delay, Feit's trial started in 2016. During Feit's trial, evidence was presented by the prosecutor that suggested a deal was struck between the district attorney and church leaders so that the image of the church could be protected. A letter of August 1960 was presented. It was sent between clergy officials. It expressed concerns about how Kennedy's presidential campaign and the re-election chances of the local Catholic sheriff would suffer if a priest was charged in Irene's death. A former reporter, Daryl Davis, testified about an off-the-record meeting between him and the district attorney in 1962.
What kind of meeting was that? What did the district attorney tell you about the purpose of the meeting?
He wanted to inform us of some facts regarding the Irene Garza case.
Who did he say killed Irene Garza?
The way I remember him expressing it, that he knew that John Feit, I think he said Father Feit, had killed Irene Garza, and the church knew it and had agreed that he did it. That he was not going to prosecute it because he had reached agreement with the church that he placed in a monastery for disturbed priests and would remain there the rest of his life. They would keep him there for the rest of his life. But it all came together as part of the agreement that he was going to plead nolo contendere and pay a $500 fine, but the church was going to take him and keep him for the rest of his life.
Tashney also testified. Irene's childhood friend, Anna Maria Hollingsworth, was also testified about the time in 1960 when Garza spoke to her about Feit.
She told me that we had a new priest, that he thought he was handsome, and I said, well, most priests are nice looking, but then she continued and said, well,
Let me stop you there. Did she tell you what the priest's name was?
Yes, he said John Feit.
Continue, ma'am.
And then she said that, but the thing is that she says it's not the same. She says going to confession anymore because I don't get to stay in the confessional. He comes to pull me out and say, oh, this place isn't good enough for you. Let's go to the rectory where you'll be more comfortable, and then they would walk off and go to the rectory.
The other two women, Beatriz Garcia and Cleotide Tilly Sanchez, testified about Feit's strange behavior around them in the 1960s. In closing argument, the defense lawyer asked jurors to consider the lack of actual evidence in the case. On December 7th, jurors decided Feit was guilty. A sentence of 57 years was asked by the prosecutor. 57 years was the amount of time that had passed since Irene's disappearance. On December 8, 2017, the jury sentenced John Feit to life. On the 12th of February 2020, Feit died of natural causes while serving a life sentence at a Texas prison. If you find this interesting, then you can watch these videos. As always, thanks for watching.